Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to do a review on The Lost Provinces. It's a game designed by John Gorkowski and published by Hollandspiele Games. And this is one that I've already done an unboxing of on the channel, and I wanted to now share some thoughts after playing it several times. And I was tweeting out some little update videos I was shooting the other day as inspired by Joel Toppin, who's really great at shooting these little 2-minute, 20-second vignettes and putting them out there and giving you quick, snappy little reviews or a snapshot of the game in progress. And I wanted to do something similar to kind of tease this game a little bit more, because I think this is a game that may be getting overlooked by some people, especially those who are newer to war games or experienced war gamers that maybe want to get something that's fast and easy to get to the table. Instead of waiting till the end of the review for me to give you my overall thoughts, whether it's a thumbs up or thumb down, definitely thumbs up. This is a fun game. As I showed the unboxing, it's a 7-page rule book. So you're talking about a really easy game to grok. It's low counter density, low rules overhead. So there's only 42 land units. There are some abstract air and naval units that you will use. That's another part of the game. We'll kind of touch on that a little bit, but this is pretty much it. This is a turn one setup. This is not exactly the way you may set it up. You may change things up a little bit as far as what goes in what stack and where you're going to place them exactly on the map. This is what I've set up for myself. This is a setup that I've been using. I toy around a little bit more in here, whether I go with 2 stacks of 2, 1 of 4, or this one I'm going to go with a 3-in-1 because I'm going to replay this again after this review. So as I said, with all that, you get 42 land units, you get some abstract air, some naval units, and what you really have overall is it gives you a tight little game that you can easily get to the table, whether you're experienced or not in war games. If you are experienced, something you can throw down on, as we like to say, a school night and jam a game out in 60 to 90 minutes. If you're new to war games, well, first off, welcome to war games. It's the best community you can have in gaming. Sorry, I'm biased. Not sorry, I'm biased, but that's just the way I look at it. I think war gamers are great. I think war games are fantastic, and welcome along into the fantastic journey of war games. But this is a game you're going to want to check out because it eases you into war games by touching on some of the mechanics, some of the concepts that you're going to see in other war games, but it's not overbearing with the rules, and it does so in a kind of a gentle way. Like, for example, Zocs are in effect in the game, but they're different than you'll see in other games. And for those who are new to war games, Zocs are zones of control. Generally what it is say these units here, this stack of units here, in most games they generally will have a 6 hex zone of influence or zone of control where it's going to stop units from moving any further or other effects like that. In this game, what it does is just adds a +1 movement to move out of a hex that is in contact with an enemy, and when you're moving in through the Zoc or out of the Zoc. So that's just a kind of a quick explanation of that, and experienced war gamers will know what I'm talking about there. But generally what goes on here is there are 3 axes of advance here. You have one here on the west, southwest, you have one on the west, and then one up in the north. You've got a counter on top of that. That's like just a reminder to me that unit, that stack of units doesn't come in until the second turn. They're going to make their way down to Samron. You're going to start off, or you can, if you choose, start off with the units in Samron. You'd be foolish not to for 2 reasons. Number one is that is another avenue of advance. The second is your reinforcements, which come in on turns 5 and turn 7, will come in at 2109, which is to the east of that location in Samron. So you're going to want to make sure that you're protecting that. The other option, or the other reason why, is this will protect your supply lines. This especially, this crossroads here is very critical to protecting for your supply. The supply-ness is pretty simple, easy to understand. Another concept that new wargamers are going to have to learn about, but in this game it's just not difficult at all. How supply works is you have to be within 3 hexes that you can travel through of a rail or a road line. And that rail or road line has to have an unimpeded connection with a supply location like you have here in Batambang, and then you have over here as well on the east side for the French, and then for the Thais you have one here in Aranyaprathet, and then one down here in Chantrapuri Mung, and then as well as one up north. So it's not hard to be in supply in this game, but there is the chance that you could be out of supply, especially for the Thais. They can zip around the French and they can cut off one of the supply locations, especially, like I said, with that crossroads there. So something to bear in mind. It, again, for new war gamers, it's not a hard concept. You're going to probably say, hey, I don't get it. But when you play it, it does make sense. And the only negatives I can find in the game is the fact that, being that there are 3 avenues of advance, war gamers that are looking for something deeper or not going to be as excited about this. But that's only if you really want something complex. If you're like into OCS, BCS, things like that, and that's what you really live and die for, and you want that all the time in your games, this will probably be too light for you. For the average wargamer, though, they're going to have fun with it, because even though there's only 3 axes of advance, the die rolls, the stacks, the way you place your units, and the way the combat will play out does change the gameplay each time slightly to wildly. Depends on your die rolls. I've had some really bad die rolls where the ties were, took a hell of a lot of losses in the first couple turns, and then I've had it easy where I just blew through the French right there, and then the big fight obviously was at the center point, which is generally how most of these games are going to play. It seems there and here, and then about turn 2 to turn 3 is where Samurong is going to become more of a big key. But overall, moving these units up, and whether you try to go here or you try to go up in the center, is going to obviously change things, because you can maybe make an end run around them and try to take these guys out of supply too. So again, it goes back to experimenting with each different play and what it is you want. Now, the other problem I have with the game is the production quality. Now, I'm a big fan of Hollandspiele. I really do love their titles. I've got several of their games. They've got an amazing catalog of games. It has nothing to do with the production quality of the game. It is fantastic. It's a gorgeous map. Counters are great, but the problem is also the counters. They're pretty thick. And in this game, you have stacks of 4, and that is absolutely the limit with Hollandspiele games with the Blue Panther type of printing, because they're so thick. You've got 4, and then you can throw in a dug-in counter, an attack counter, and maybe even the air superiority counter. Now you may end up having a stack that's 7 counters tall. And as you can see here, these 3 big stacks are going to go up against this one stack, and moving them and then pulling them apart to see their combat factors is a little problematic, especially due to the fact that these not only are thick, but they also have that kind of a slick coating. So that I found problematic, and it did frustrate me on a few occasions, but that is not a showstopper by any means. It's just a kind of a personal pet peeve. The entire point of the game is for the Thais to take back the lost provinces. They're here in Thailand. They're going to start. They're going to push into Cambodia. They're going to push through these French units. They have a numerically superior force. They're definitely going to put the French on the defense, which is why they're going to be using the dug-in condition quite a bit. That's pretty much how you're going to stay most of your game, is dug in for the French. The Thais, on the other hand, are going to want to be as mobile as they can, because they want to try to blow through, punch some holes in the lines, and then get these victory hexes. And what these victory hexes are these ones I get these little tiddlywinks on, that just for my own ease of seeing. But each one does have a victory point star in it, so it's not hard to see, but I like to throw those on the table just because it makes it easier for me to see, and I also like the way it looks. Each victory location is going to equal 1 point at the end of the game, but it can change back and forth over the course of the game. That's why it matters at the end of the game. The Thais may take it initially, the French may win it back. That's why control of the objectives is key. For the Thais, they need to not only take it, but maintain it for points at the end of the game. There is also the Gulf of Siam here. There is an abstract naval battle. You'll have these 2 units here for the Thais, 2 for the French. You go in there and you battle it out, and then at the end of the 10th turn, whoever is in the Gulf of Siam, that side gets 1 victory point. That's something that probably won't come into play until later in the game. If the French are behind, they're going to want to push there, and vice versa. If the Thais are behind, they're going to want to push to get that 1 victory point. Or maybe if it's tight, they're going to want to make sure that they get that victory point to assure victory. Now, for the French, they obviously can take Aranyaprathet, which is what the Thais start with. That will give them 1 victory point. Where they're really going to get most of their victory points is in rolling dice in combat. If their final die roll is a 10 or greater, they're going to immediately get a victory point. So they'll just move up as they fight and get victory points that way. And that is a pretty cool design decision, because, as I said before, this is really just a defensive battle for the French. They're doing everything they can to delay and deny the objectives to the Thais. So how are you going to do it from a design perspective to make it where the French say, hey, I can just lay back and play defense all day and turtle? No, you've got to incentivize them to attack, and that's a great way to incentivize them. You get 2, 3, 4 attacks that the French do that roll 10 or greater. That's going to be pretty awesome. You can get 3, 4 points right there, which is key, because if the Thais can take all the objectives, that's 5 points right there. You still have a point here in the Gulf of Siam, so that's potentially 6. If you can win 3 or 4 battles, it's 6-4. If you can push out and take away Aranyaprathet, now you're back to tie. So it's a really neat little design decision, and I appreciate the fact that it does give the French to do something more to do than just sit there and get punched in the face. They can actually punch back. They're incentivized to do so. So another thing here is movement. I'm going to go touch on this for new wargamers especially. Movement's pretty straightforward and simple. Experienced wargamers will understand this easy enough. Clear hexes is 1 movement point, jungle is 2, and mountains are 3 movement points. That's all you have to do. Now, for rail movement and for road movement, rail movement is half movement point for vehicles and the train, which is down here. That's going to run its way up into the middle in Sisyphon and possibly even all the way to Aaron Yaperthet if it wants to, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just play defense first. For vehicles, they can use the train tracks because there are roadways besides train tracks for maintenance, and then you have the main roadways that vehicles can also use. Movement is in effect doubled for them because they only pay half movement point per hex if they stay along the road or the rail line all the way. For infantry, they get 1 extra movement point, so they have a movement point of 4. They will actually end up getting movement points of 5. Movement points are really critical in this game because everything is done via movement points. Your movement, your combat, all of that is done, and your dig-in status is all done using movement points. So the other part of the using the movement points is the fact that I touched on it before about Zox. If you're going to move out of, say we've got this cavalry unit and he is in contact with both of these French units, and he wants to get out of here. He wants to try to move his way down here to attack this French unit here. He's going to have to pay 2 points to go into the jungle, plus 1 point to exit. It's just a 1 movement point penalty, so it would be 3 points. If he wanted to move from one Zoc to another, it's going to be 2 plus the 1 movement. Again, it would be 3. If he wants to move over here now, he wants to try to bypass this unit, he's going to pay 1 plus the 1 movement because he's still in contact here, so it'll be 2. So he just expended all his movement points in that turn, but he's bypassed that unit, and he can start moving into contact with the next unit. Again, he leaves, he's going to have to pay 1 plus 1 because he's still in contact, so he's going to use 2. He's going to have 3 movement points left over, and let's just say for argument's sake, there was only 1 unit there. He'd pay 1 movement, he'd still have 2 left. For him to attack that, it's going to cost him 1 movement point plus the value it would take to move into that hex. So it's a clear hex. He would have to pay 2 more movement points, then he would be fully expended. So he would then commit to combat, which is what that arrow is for, to signify he's going to commit to battle at the end of the turn. All right, so let's discuss combat real quick. It's your standard ratio combat, so you're going to add up all of your combat factors, compare them to the defender's combat factor, get your ratio, apply modifiers, roll some dice, and then look at your CRT along the top here. It is from 1 to 13. You can get a 1 even with a 2d6 roll because you can have a negative modifier, which could bring Snake Eyes down to a 1. But the attacker will take the bulk of the losses up until 8. When you roll 8 or greater, that's when things start to go in the attacker's favor. This is a trade-off of 1 step each, and then 9 or better is where the attacker gets the benefit of inflicting more damage on the defender. So it is really critical for the Thai player to make sure not only to have the numerical advantage, but to try to attack the French, force them into a defending spot where the terrain is not to their advantage. And likewise for the French, they have to make sure they are in terrain that's to their advantage. And one of the biggest ones is north of Samrang. When you get up in the mountains, you can block off that road pass because it's slow going through the mountains. It takes them 3 movement points each, so it's tough to get through here, but they're going to have to, which forces them through the road network there. And it's critical for the French to get in there as quickly as possible. If they can get some reinforcements up there, it's even better. But you want to stay dug in because being up in the mountains gives you a really huge bonus. Being dug in doubles your combat factor. So if you got 2 4 strength units, it's going to be 8 regularly, but dug in it's going to be 16. Being in the mountains doubles it again, so you have a 32 combat factor up there, which means you're going to end up probably being 1 to 1. Now that's where the air superiority is going to come into play for the Thais. This, when you place this down on the map, it's kind of like the Zoc we talked about before. Not only are you controlling the air over this hex, but all 6 surrounding hexes as well for the turn. And the French can't do anything about it except throw out their air force to deny the Thai player that benefit. 1 time per game, that's it. It's a 1-time use. So for the French, they really have to make sure that they use that at the critical time, because if they don't, they've just thrown it away for no reason. And there's no die roll or anything. You just put it out there, it negates it, it pushes it back here, and the Thai player can then use it again the next turn. The air superiority is constant throughout the game for the Thais. The French only get the one-time use to deny their air superiority. Now for supply is pretty simple. You just have to be within 3 hexes of a rail or a road hex. If you can travel overland within 3 hexes to get to that rail or road hex, that rail or road hex has to be able to reach a supply point, which you have one here and one there for the French, and then you've got one here, one up north, and then one down here for the Thais. And it's pretty simple. It's not difficult to understand, so it's a gentle way of introducing newer wargamers to supply lines in games, and why it's critical to think about keeping your units in supply, because if you're not in supply, obviously your combat factor is going to be halved. There's no attrition based on the supply, so it's just pretty simple, just cutting it in half. But like I said, it's a great intro for new wargamers to learn that, and it makes you think critically around the map, because there's only 3 avenues of approach for the most part in this game. There's going to be one here, here, and up there. So one of the first things I noticed when I looked at it is you want to try to control that crossroads, because that would cut off this supply line up to the north, as well as this one up north, Samrong. And that's a really big point, because not only does it slow down the Thai advance from the north, it also protects your reinforcement location, which is over there at 2109, and they're going to come in on the map, the French are, in turn 5 and turn 7. So what you're going to want to do if you're the Thais, you're going to try to want to get around everybody, bypass everybody, maybe with your cavalry unit, and try to take control of that. Yeah, sure, you're going to pull a French unit after you, and it's going to take you out pretty simple, but you're drawing forces away from your main body, and that's one of the ways that you're going to learn to think in the game, which, as I said again, I keep stressing, this is a great intro war game for new war gamers, and that's some examples as to why. And speaking of that, all of the information is open, so you can examine stacks at any time, which again is great if you're an experienced wargamer wanting to teach a new wargamer, because you can give them the ties with the numerical superiority and then walk them through what, give them some suggested tactics on what they could do, and let them then reason for themselves. Then you can introduce them to dice roll modifiers, the DRMs, and how those work. One of the interesting things on the DRMs is if you get your ratio, the difference in the ratio is going to give you a positive or a negative modifier. And how that works is, say, for example, here I've got a 3-to-1 advantage for the Thais. It is a 2 difference between 3 and 1. So I'm going to get a +2 to my die roll for the Thais. And likewise, if you have a defensive situation where it's, say, 1 to 3, it is now a -2. And that goes back to that 1, how I said you can get a -1. You may end up in that situation in the game, and it's not a good one to be in. Combat in the ocean is abstracted, pretty simple. Same type of concept. Once you get in there, you must have combat. Unlike on the ground, once you're in, the only way to have combat is you must be in contact. So you must have units in contact next to an adjacent hex to that unit. Combat is voluntary. You do not have to go into combat. You can just sit there and say, you know what, I'm not going to use that one remaining movement point to attack. Instead, I'm going to dig in. So now you have kind of reached a stalemate situation, which for the Thais, you don't want that. The French will welcome that all day long. Hell yeah, sit there, let's kind of wave at each other across the lines, because I'll just wait run the clock out on you, and you won't be able to win. The Thais, tempo is everything. They want to get through as quick as possible, but not overextend themselves too fast. Some things to bear in mind when you play. But overall, I really think Lost Provinces is a fun game. Like I said, it's not a very complex game. It's a pretty simple game to get to the table, which may not be attractive to some wargamers who want something a little beefier, a little meatier. But if you are looking for something you can get on the table 60 to 90 minutes, or you want to get something that you can introduce new wargamers to, this is the one to grab. If you're a new wargamer, definitely give this one consideration. It's a kind of a lesser known conflict in all of the battles across history, so it's kind of neat to not only play something that is lesser known, it's not a big fancy Bulge or Gettysburg or whatever, it's also approachable by anyone, easy to understand. It will teach you some really good core concepts that you're going to use and carry forward with you when playing any war game in the future, and it'll make you feel like you've accomplished something, because you have. This is an interesting game, and it does make you think critically as far as where to attack, but not overly complicated. It's pretty evident where you need to go, but how you get there is the interesting part of the journey. So I hope that helps you guys out if you've been considering this game, or if you've been curious about the game. It is a fun little game, and there are plenty of Hollandspiele titles that I would recommend. I've got several of them myself. A great publisher with a lot of interesting and sometimes quirky titles, but really worth checking out. So if you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.